I'm Chief Knowledge Officer at Unwritten. Talking about, as the title suggests, from extractive to reciprocal, co-creating data with speakers of unwritten and endangered languages. So we're going to just start with a bit of discussion when we talk about language data, what we mean by language data. What is it? What do we refer to as language data? So language data typically refers to any form of human-generated text, speech, or interaction that can be used to train, fine-tune, or evaluate artificial intelligence systems, large LLMs, etc., which a large number of these we are already quite familiar with. And what are these types? I mean, textual content can be, say, all our media posts, emails, blog posts, any printed content on the internet, documents, articles. And conversational data can be, say, chats with virtual assistant conversations or customer service transcripts, etc. With speech data, on the other hand, can be we can refer to as, say, voice recordings of any kind, which can also include transcriptions from, say, consumer interactions and audio collected through smart devices. I mean, every time we call Alexa to play a song. So, and of course, language data can also be referred to, say, metadata and linguistic patterns, a lot of which can indicate style of communication as well as patterns and tones and sentiments. Now, why does it all matter? It is, of course, the raw material that all of our artificial intelligence systems are built on, and they are being the data is used to teach the models how to understand, generate, and respond to human language, to fine-tune the systems, and improve safety mechanisms in terms of, say, bias or child safety or misinformation or toxicity in different domains. However, when we talk about this data, we do understand, we are all aware that it is often harvested from publicly available online sources or user interactions, which of course does bring into forth the questions about consent, privacy, and ownership of the data. And so when we talk about data, what are the ways in which large organizations are using language data? What are the ways in which they're procuring data? Which is often also without user consent, or if the consent exists, it is not a very clear explicit consent, or it lacks to a large part user agency there. So many AI companies then operate in some gray zones with respect to these aspects of data, where boundaries between what is public, what is shared, and what is private are very blurred. And so data can be scraped from the web, data harvesting from by web scraping, and for example, ChatGPT, OpenAI, we all know they have scraped a large part of their data from the internet. Google's language models. Users were rarely aware that the data was being used for the purpose that it was used. Then, of course, there are the user interaction data that, for instance, are chats with ChatGPT, for instance, or Google, or Claude, or all the AI systems when we are talking to them. So, yes, the systems are there in place to inform us of whether our consent exists there or not. Then what about social media, for instance? Platforms, all the social media platforms such as Meta. Now, they draw their data from Facebook, Instagram, public content, and they have a review system in place, but of course the question that arises is are those review policies really transparent? Are they easily accessible? And are they is there an option for our data not to be used there? So for example, the policies that Meta has, what we've gathered by looking at their publicly available documents is that even if a user objects, firstly, for example, Meta, you have to raise a request to opt out of their data to be used. And that review request, it can be rejected. It can be accepted, it can be rejected. It's not just toggling the button on and off there. And of course, another instance, we also have all our wearable devices, Google Glasses, the AI glasses that have come up with Ray-Ban, for instance, or the wearable watches that we have. They're all recording data. They do claim that they delete the data after use immediately, but to some extent, the metadata and information about their usage is being stored for, as we often hear, for quality and training purposes. And of course, there are sources from, data is also sourced from, say, third-party data vendors, where big companies might purchase data from brokers who aggregate and sell user content from surveys, from their user bases, etc. Now, again, in reality, the policies do exist, but what is the level of transparency in those policies, and what are the level at which the opt-out mechanisms exist? They are often complex, they are often hidden, they are often difficult to find, and more often than not, they are reactive rather than proactive. You can go and opt out, but it is not something that you opt out at the start of using of those services. And of course, there is very limited enforcement, we presume, about their data usage policies, and of course, they are not very evenly applied. For instance, a paid customer or an enterprise user will be assured that the data is not going to be used for training purposes, but a free user, on the other hand, their data will be used for training purposes. So the guarantees will probably exist for paid users rather than for the free customers. So there's unevenness there as well. Now for this, keeping all of this background in mind, we try to evaluate how some of the public and corporate language technology users and creators, they govern linguistic data. Particularly data originating and our view, specifically we keep in view data originating from minoritized and vulnerable speech communities. And so there are some questions that we ask with respect to this, keeping this background information in mind, that the goal, for instance, I have some goals on the left side, and the 4 questions we are trying to ask with respect to those goals. We try to assess whether data is benefiting the source community. Are they actually getting some tangible linguistic education or economic benefits? Are the members owners or only suppliers of the data? Then is the community, what is the level of agency the community has in deciding how and whom the data is being used by? Can the consent be withdrawn? Is governance co-determined? Then to evaluate whether contributors are informed of, say, storage or data management practices by the aggregators of the data. Is the community credited? Are the speakers of the community credited? Are the other terms clear and understandable for the community as well? And again, let's not forget that the vulnerable speech communities that we are probably referring to, is there some harm? There is some harm mitigation involved in protecting those speech communities also. Of course, is our fairness audits conducted or not? So keeping these questions in mind, we reviewed various documents, publicly available documents, such as a number of primary sources, such as peer-reviewed publications and independent audits, clarifying data provenance and consent mechanisms that are being implemented by the organizations. So what we we did was we evaluated a qualitative measure of how their policies translate to practice, what their policies mean, and try to quantify them. My colleague will probably come to that.
There are 4 models of language data governance that emerge here. Now, these are again based on what is publicly available, either primary or secondary sources. Some of the documents include court cases against OpenAI on by a bunch of authors saying that you have just scraped this data from LibGen, so this is not what we consider. So all these things, and PTA's court case here in India. So these data sources tell us that there are 4 types. So then one is this sort of a data colonial model, corporate extractivism. So they see language as an input for a proprietary value. So the value that they create is a model that they make. So it's a byproduct of all the data that they extract from large public space, large public infrastructure. It could be books that have been physically scanned through Google, for example. Carnegie Mellon's 1 million book project is also under the code for copyright violation. So whether these data are used, Internet Archive's data, whether they were used, or with what consent when people gave out those data, we have no idea. So these people took the data, no return to the community. What they made is a product that they want to sell, and externalize profits. It's for profit, it's for them, and or probably for the venture capitalists who invest. So implicit consent, yes, they say there is consent, but no documentation of any of those things. No transparency, no revocation. Many of the authors, many of the artists are asking for revocation, and those exist. Minimal stewardship, opaque life cycle. For example, a very famous case that is going on in the US court is where OpenAI and Meta counsel suggests to the organization that delete all internal chats. So this is again. So what does it mean? So you don't even keep a track record of all the things that is happening within your office, and whatever you think could expose you are also being purged. Now, one has asked for an injection trying to prevent all the data from being lost, but yes, that's the reality here. So compliance is only based on compliance is based very thin, flimsy compliance at the legal level. So over here, the governance model that they have is this is my data, this is our proprietary data. It's completely locked, so we can't even see what data OpenAI Whisper, for example, speech model is trained. Or what is the role of the community in this? They're all data subjects. You know the subject, I hold the power and you honor my subjects. That's how it happens. The other form is also this open science, but sort of a philanthropic extractivism. So one extracts for the proprietary model. So the other, what they do is that they say, for example, common voices. There are quite a few benchmark tasks also that collects data from all over the world. They want to say that these are for the benefit of the greater good. So it's for the benefit of the greater good. Again, who is the greater good is the question. Does the community include, is community part of this greater good? It's always a question to be asked. There is strong documentation in their part where the data is, how the data is collected. But when it comes to reciprocity, when it comes to giving back to the community that gave this data, how much is it being given? Ethics is a principle, but is it shared as an accountability thing? Is it implemented and accountable? Now we are not sure. We see a lot of academic organizations, NGOs in this. And then again, the community that gives this data. So for most of these people, language is just a speech form or a text. But for the communities whose world views are expressed in this language, language is also the knowledge system. And it is probably the only knowledge system of many of the world's biodiversity hotspots or culturally significant regions. But for the organizations like these, do not see the data. The next is the shared benefit public infrastructure. So these are organizations that treat data as a national source. So we have in India, Bharat, A for Bharat, not A for Bharat, we have Washington, we have A Ghosh, in Australia we have Language Data Commons, in Europe we have European Language Data Commons, we have Clarin SSH Marketplace or whatever it is. So there are quite a few organizations across the world which are basically nationally or centrally governed. So very broad social returns. So they make the data openly accessible. For example, if you look into the Indian context, we have a national language technology hub which also gives you inference possibilities through API tokens. That's also free, and then inference itself is free. So you have centralized governance. These are again large bodies of centralized governance. There is some consultation when it comes to participation in the governance, and institutions take up custodian role. open APIs, as I just told you, and some level of quality assurance is there here. So is it legally sourced data, ethically sourced data? We can probably claim yes. There may be some gray area, but most probably yes. Very high legal compliance we see in this, and procedurally seems to be fair. So this is one where the contributor is also a beneficiary. So, for example, if you look at the example of India, we have Bashini, which takes data from multiple sources, but also makes these resources available openly for a lot of other purposes, including documentation, translation. So you have a Bashini app which is completely free. As of now, their model does not say anywhere at any point of time that we are going to charge for it. The inference, again, the API is openly available for developers. The inference, as of now, is running for free. You can again download these models without any cost. So this is how most of the models work. So you find the same thing with Australian language data commons. You find the same thing as European language data commons. So these are shared public infrastructure. So what they call as digital public infrastructures. So where the community is a beneficiary. Now there are very small organizations too that exist. These are not very large, but these are ones that do think that these are commons. These are empowering commons. So this is where the data is more than just a sample. This is data as a living heritage. So they are held collectively in collective custody. The communities are at central play here, right? So the community benefits include vitality, visibility, local skills, enhancing the skills of the locals, and livelihood promises also sometimes are made. So co-decisions through MOUs, there are a lot of co-decisions, MOUs, data trust are involved, and revocable consent is there, very important. So full transparency, multilingual and multimodal consent is how they work. And preservation is integral. They think preserving the data, not just for language streaming, but preserving the data for future use is also very important. So then also is a very strong preservation here. So here there is strong accountability with the independent oversight. So one of the good initiatives that we can point out to is the Canadian example here, the Canadian indigenous data and language, Canadian AI first policies are here. So those are good examples. Now, so they are co-sovereign models, so both researchers, developers, and community members are all equal members, they're all the same board as we have. So community takes a very important role of stewardship and decision making. Now, so I just gave some examples in this while I speak. So if some of you can think of the models that we have and where do they fall? Can you guys think of those? Where do some of the models that we have, where do they fall? So this is how it is, the data governance continuum. So extractivism to reciprocal benefits. So we have a full proprietary to co-sovereign model. So I'm not saying that open science is bad, but open science done for the benefit of a developer. For a developing community alone probably is not a good way to go ahead. So what does communities role in this? This is the continuum that we see. Now, can we take a few minutes here to think of, we are users of several of these things, right? Several of these AI tools. Can we think and say of the 4 types, where do you think the AI tools that you use fall under? Now, yeah, exactly. So where would ChatGPT fall?
Probably the first one.
First one. So they're proprietary models, true. ChatGPT would fall under there. So OpenAI is very famous for its, in the code across all the continents actually. So what else? What are things that we use?
Maybe GitHub in public.
GitHub is public, yes. Especially if you're a coder and the code is being trained on, GitHub is a public thing because you got a co-pilot back. Yes. Anything else? So have you guys heard of this thing called Mozilla Common Voices? Okay. And so any other tool that you guys are familiar with? Same Google. That's the biggest extractor possible.
We have the Reva AI, Reva AI, which is nothing but for digital marketing purposes. It has been used.
And the focus was not on how data is collected, shared, and used. The focus was on how data is collected, how it is shared, how it is reused, and governed within their ecosystem. So we again we assess them across 4 dimensions of. You want me to talk about the principles then?
Let's go back to those 4 questions.
Yes, the data was with respect to the community, whether it is to strengthen the community, whether communities retain sovereignty over linguistic representations and the right models, to measure whether procedural transparency and custodianship of community data is there, and to assess fairness, consent, integrity, and accountability in protection of vulnerable speakers. So these are the four scales on the basis of which we evaluated these organizations. I'll come back to this. And as we can see, there are a lot of red flags. There are less number of green flags than there are red flags. I mean, it's just how it is. I mean, it's not a criticism. It's not an appreciation. It's just how it is. That these are the. So when we were working on our own data governance policies and practices, we for that very purpose, we evaluated all of these to understand how it is that we can maintain the integrity of the data that we are sourcing from and from the community members that we are sourcing from, respecting their rights and.
Yeah, you know what data they hold most of the time.
Okay.
So whether it is representative or not representative is something that we won't be able to.
Because you don't have access to the
You don't
models.
have. You know, we might have access to the models as a user or as a.
No, sure, I mean, but
not the data. Access.
Yeah.
What we are assessing
Right.
is not their data, but we are assessing how they
what
govern
they
their.
claimed their benchmarks.
No, how they govern their data.
No, I know whether those claims are from the governance documents or whatever.
Exactly. From the governance documents. So we are not looking at the data, we are not looking at
Yeah.
the integrity of the data itself.
Right.
We are looking at it from how they, so the data governance will include everything from collection to the end of the life cycle. So we are looking at that.
Right.
So we won't, even if you want to, we won't be able to comment on it because we don't know what are the language. For example, we know for Google, he's used all the data in YouTube. But for instance, we don't know how much data is for there in each language. That has not been made public. But on the other hand, Facebook has made it.
No, so what I'm saying is that, I mean, kind of what also is.
Linguistic data itself. That's what I'm trying to say. We are looking at how they manage the linguistic data. On what principles do they manage the linguistic data?
Sure.
So that's an altogether a different thing that we could talk. So our organization, in fact, specializes in collecting those data, benchmarking indexes, and trying to poke hole in all the models.
Right.
So, or rather, trying to be very fair in terms of diversity. So what you're referring to is diversity in terms of speech. So within a speech community, the Bhojpuri film songs is not the only form of Bhojpuri spoken, right? So that is a different work that we do. In fact, that's what most of the work is. Here, what we're trying to do is how they manage the data. Is there any transparency? How they create, manage, and how do they use the data within the organization? Focus is that. So the problem that you are citing is also another problem,
Right.
equally bigger problem. In certain dimensions, probably they're more extractive. But in certain other dimensions where they give fair wages to data work, they probably will score
Isn't
much.
that a whole different thing though? Like, I would say fair wages for data work doesn't fall under governance.
No, that would fall under governance. How I value it.
No, but as a community member, if my language is dying, however much you're paying me is not enough, right? So it's not, the payment is not in kind. The
payment is not in
reward
kind.
is not in kind.
Exactly. So in certain other things, then they will fall into the red, right?
Right.
So not all will be green. So that's what we are trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's why we're trying to use a fourfold model. So instead of getting one score to all, so it's the fourth, where you can see that some of them which ranks very higher also ranks very low in other aspects as well.
It does always.
Yeah, so these are actual time that you spend in
Yeah.
collecting data. So if you want to create data, for example, Karya has two sort of work. So they have data in house. One, they will have data that they create for others. So for the data that they create for others, I won't be able to really judge them on that. Rather, I'll be able to only judge them on the data that they create in house. And those data are actually made public. So if you want to use those data to build a model or to give it back to the community, probably we could go and talk to them if they are willing to do that as well, at least with some of our personal experience. So evaluating an organization like Karya is a slightly tricky affair, especially in this thing. So whatever the organization that you're seeing, they all are the data, they are all the people who are consumers of data in some sense.
Sure.
They do value additions to it. Okay, so but Karya in another sense is sort of a mediatory layer in most of the sense, but they do have some of their own data, which at least for whatever we know is available for fine tuning and further.
I mean, it's meant for Microsoft research. It's very simple.
Yeah. So so I'm not going. So I can evaluate. So I would rather evaluate Azure and Microsoft than evaluate Cardia for that.
Sure. Yeah. No, but
Yeah, that's the idea here. That we have. The data providers have the authority to control and govern the data. R stands for responsibility. Are you responsible for the data that you're collecting, and to what extent? And E is ethics. So legality is one, but ethics is another thing. So what level do you go for ethical considerations? Do ethical considerations override your commercial interest? So those are the questions that we are asking. So those questions actually, this principle guided us to frame the whole study of the topic. So that's how we are going into. So now we are trying to also, now we are going into this thing. So that's an abstract principle that has been declared by the data alliance. Now, can those abstract principles be implemented into a model of data collection, especially language data collection from vulnerable speech communities? So for that, within our organizations, what we have done is we have used a 4R framework. The 4R framework was first written about in the context of indigenous action research, especially in the context of education domain. So by Kirkness and Brandeis in Canada, in the Canadian context. Respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility. So these 4 R's are now our operational principles for creating a model of data collection that would be much more reciprocal as opposed to. So now I hand this over to my colleague Shyam. Shyam will talk about our in-house project BOLI.
Centric research. So BOLI is a network where there are 3 stakeholders are there. I mean, I'm saying stakeholders to the, first part is of the speakers. They are, where we are getting speech data, and then second is the linguist, and third is the, whosoever is the providing platform. Here we are Unreal Tech and Council of Diversity and Innovation is providing that platform to speakers and linguists. So ethical principle, we are fairly following all the ethical principle which Karthik and when you discuss here. So we affirm the linguistic data and not mere resources but expression of human identity. Where cultural, we have, speakers have their own cultural heritage and collective knowledge to treat it with respect, care and reciprocity. We are carrying all of these principles in that. Our ethics rest on the 4 R's, which is respect, relevance, and reciprocity and responsibility. We are equally, taking care of these 4 R's in BOLI project and founded on the principle of do not harm. Do not harm is do no harm. Not it is not confined to the harm. It is from basic to the higher level, where we are taking care of every respect, every level of their respect, regarding the models. And model building intervene to real life social worlds. Therefore, we commit to minimize harm, preventing exploitation and protecting the agency and dignity of all contributors. So this is the representation till now we have covered, where we have 33 languages from Indo-Aryan language family. There are 7 languages from Dravidian. Tibeto-Burman we have covered 16 languages, and from Austro-Asiatic we have 5 languages. In Indo-Aryan we have Mewari, Odia, Maithili, Rajbongshi, Maghai, Lambadi, Siddhi, Jananga, and Sindhi, Kumauni, Khota, Nepali, Mewari, Kurmali, Hindi, Angeka, Avdi. So I think you people can see these of the languages. There are some of the scheduled languages, but somehow we are trying to cover all the lesser known and lesser resource languages. Most of the data belongs to those languages. Those have minor languages which we call. So in these we have you can see the duration of data in each language family. We have okay.
These are total numbers? Like total number
Total
of
number of
Yeah,
hours.
yes, total number of
Audio data.
Yeah. So I think we didn't put how much data is transcribed.
No, that's
So yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is the ongoing project. So we have around maybe 50 languages we have somehow covered, and now maybe 15 to 20 languages are in the pipeline to start with. We are almost finalized those languages, and we will start maybe after this in a week. And all well, we have other script transcription of other script also. But the IPA is the standard which is required for for the linguistic community as well as other community to take that. They can understand that. And the quality assurance is there. So we are targeting to have at least 2 hours of transcribed and gloss data. So this data is transcribed, multilingual translation is there, free translation is there in that, and then interlinear glossing is there, which is glossing rules are there. So we are trying to get and prepare high quality data. So the target is to have 2 hours of data in each language, so we can represent a wider spectrum of language available on the globe. But if community people, linguists are ready and they accept this challenge to do, maybe it could be the 10 hours of data or 20 hours of data or beyond that, we will fairly support them by following the ethical principles and taking care of all logistics which we will provide. And this is the a bigger we have so far covered this much of, and we are trying to cover much more in all of the we are working specifically for the Indian languages, but if we have scope work beyond that, then we can work on. Now these are the toolkit which we have for the governance bit. We have 4 policies here in the BOLI network participant term and condition, which we will start with, and then we will have BOLI data governance policy, which I think some of you are taking pictures.
So it's open source document.
Yes.
So all these things are according to the internal benchmarking thing. Task this has the highest, scored the highest in the benchmark, saying that this is the most robust model for translation. So we collected data on Tripoli Bangla, basically Bangla spoken in Tripura, and then we benchmarked it on translation of 900 sentences. So we found that the model that did very well for standard Bangla just simply failed for Tripoli Bangla. So badly that they don't even stand in comparison for a production system at all. So this, again, the idea of monolithic language has been challenged. So when we have BOLI, so the word BOLI, I'm sure of you recognize, this is the language of everyday life. It's not the language that someone else imagined and wrote in a textbook. So when such linguistic data is presented in the benchmark task, we find that they're just failing below par on many of these translation systems. So Tripoli Bangla is one. So many such benchmarking tasks now are being carried out to understand how they would be useful in the real world context. So we do benchmarking task at translation, and we do benchmarking task at speech recognition system as well. So both of them, when it comes to non-standard varieties, they don't.
I can give an example there. So from the standard Bangla does not have gender pronouns for that, but Tripoli Bangla, the pronoun systems are slightly varied, and some of those pronouns completely different from standard Bangla are homophonous with the other lexical items in the language. So the models completely failed in recognizing those pronouns. The models did not recognize those pronouns and rather recognized the homophonous lexical items in place of those. So this is just one example that came out of a very preliminary look, and I think if we delve deep into it,
very detailed. There's a research paper published on it.
This is going to be a whole a lot of interesting insights would come out of it.
But what this experience tells us, or there are other more similar experiences, that the language data set on which these models are built on are not, as you pointed out, representative at all. So how do we classify representativeness is based on 2 dimensions. So we classify representative, so the BOLI data set is also representative in some sense. We classify representativeness based on 2 axes. One is representative in terms of structural diversity. So when I talk of structural diversity, I'm talking of most used to least used structures of languages. And when I talk of stylistic diversity, another axis, this is one conversation where I use a different style. But if I'm going to have a same conversation with you guys right at the tea shop, the conversation will have a different style. So we're also covering style variation as well. So by focusing on both structured illustrations for structural variation and more everyday language use through BOLI, what we have done is we have tried to cover these two axes of diversity to try and get a representative sample. So for now, we are encouraging at least 2 hours of speech data from one male participant and one female participant. But for what we see is that once we start working with them, community members are also very eager to contribute more. And those cases we we're actually trying and building models for these languages to begin with ASR models, because once we believe 10 hours of gloss, at least annotated data, we could fine tune some of the existing ASR models, make them much better. And we are also trying to fine tune similarly translation models. So the BOLI data then.
Are there underserved languages to choose?
So we work on this principle, so it's a collaborative network. So if someone is willing to join the network, then we are happy to support them. We also actively seek partners to work with.
But there's no criteria for choosing.
No, so this is so we are not market driven. So we are completely driven by the logic of inclusion. So and our major focus is on those languages that are not listed on the 22. Or even if they're listed in the 22, those are the ones that are final print within the scheduled language.
Not market, but in terms of success of the model, or how many people will this serve? If it's 20,000, 30,000, are there any thoughts on?
So far we have reached,
return on even the community?
No. So far we have reached 90 plus speech communities that who are working with us. 1,500 hours of data is with us. Now we are working on fine tuning some of these models. For example, one language that we are trying to fine tune the Tamil model is for Irula. It's a language spoken in the Nilgiri Hills, apparently closer to Tamil, but still another distinct language by itself. The census listed as a mother tongue under Tamil, but it is not. It's a distinct language by itself. And the models just fail. Tamil models just fail. So we are now working with the community to build an ASR model that could actually better recognize this. Now, in terms of success and in terms of reach, so if you look at the 90 plus speech communities that we have reached to, what we have done is that we have given hope, at least, or we have shown that there could be collaborators in your effort to preserve your languages. And we believe that language technology could be a very useful tool for preservation. So,
but there's been no pattern of failures.
Market numbers to look at patterns of success.
Not really, just like, as a long-term roadmap, we've understood that these are families we can put efforts in, and we've had some struggles.
So as a long-term roadmap, we want to grow the network. So the number of nodes increase. If the number of nodes increase in the network, then the denser the network becomes, the better success for the network.
As you can see on the map, right now, in parts of the country, we have concentrated pockets, say in the northeast or in the south, but we would like to reach across the country.
Yes, and across the country. So
Yes.
there is considerable gap in what we do. So why I'm stressing on this is because of one fact. Now, with the current understanding of how models work, the finer and the richer the data is, the better the model performance is. So this is an assumption that we work on. Unfortunately, we have not yet fully trained a multilingual model based on the data we have collected yet. But when we train, probably we would have also some quantified. There is individual efforts are going on. So, for example, we are focusing on training data models for at least 6 languages in the northeast, 1 in the south right now. But the denser our model becomes, the denser network becomes, we think we could fine tune much better multilingual models, which could actually serve a lot of these people, a lot more people than what the current models can. Because in the current models, these data sets are not even represented. Some of these data sets don't exist. We have it, as I pointed out, Irula is not considered Tamil, so Irula speakers are never, Irula speech form is never there in the Tamil training data set. And we're also working on Nilgiri Tamil data set. So again, even though Tamil data set should have Nilgiri Tamil data, they doesn't exist. So the success then in this term, as I pointed out, the density of the network, the density and the coverage of the network.
So practically, but also want to building the models, giving that, trying to host the models, making it usable within the community. So those are all the other things that we try and do. So those are two but there is no prior prioritization of specific languages. Because once we do, I mean, there has to be some motivation for prioritizing some languages. Number of speakers, I would say, is a rather
Yes. If there is only one speaker left, probably that should be the highest priority.
I think you have.
Yeah, I question.
Yeah.
As we know that all of them are like most of transcript, and it varies from region to region. Region to region. As we know that, let us say that there is a language which you included in the PPT is Lambadi language. Lambadi language in Telangana, Lambadi language in Karnataka, Lambadi language in Rajasthan. It varies from region to region. The way they talk, the way they pronounce the words are completely different.
Yeah.
I mean the accuracy. I mean how the terms of in terms of accuracy, what are the challenges you will face it? Like me, I mean I just want. I'm very interested to know this because it's
So yeah, if they're willing to participate in the network, we are giving the same support that we give to other BOLI, other nodes in the network. So there is no one priority. So within Lambadi, within Telangana Lambadi, we could have two varieties. That could also be possible.
Exactly.
We are willing to support both. So we are not saying no to any of the varieties in that sense. So there is no prior conditions that. So if someone is saying, I give you funds to work on Telangana Lambadi, would you work on it? Yes, of course, we will work on it. But that doesn't mean we will not work on this language spoken in Maharashtra or Karnataka.
Okay, I have a supplementary question to that. So you have, say for example, Tulu, which has a script Tigilari, which is not in use. And now people use Kadamba, which is the Kannada script, to write it. Do you, when you're making this model, are you using the current usable script for the language, or are you trying to bring back and go to
So sometimes so there are some other challenges, similar challenges. So we use multi-scriptal approach. So if one of our participant is able to use both the scripts and transcribe them, then we are willing to invest in both the scripts equally. So for example, Konkani has 4 scripts, or Santali has, we don't know, at least 3 that I can count of. So again, we are willing to invest as long as, invest our time mostly. So if we find, yes we will, find time and money, we are willing to do both. So we are looking to enrich our things. But if we can also do some other forms of post-processing methods, transfer between these 2 scripts, then we are also investing on that, wherever possible. But for that also we need some collaborators from the community who can tell us how it maps onto both.
Also IP.
Yeah, so we keep, one of the major things that lets us do this is, we use IP as the standard form of transcription. So then we convert that into the scripts of the Indian languages. So we have a mechanism to do that, and we just need the mapping rules, so we should be able